working on that 2 days before the first case took place in New York. So he realized that this thing was going to grow. He realized pretty early on that it was going to affect our community. And so he started to put together a response plan in an effort to sort of get us ahead of the curve. Um, and I got to tell you that the really shocking thing is he was originally met with a lot of resistance about that's a Chinese problem. It isn't necessarily a United States problem. Those things never tend to get over here. And I think by now we can all sort of realize that that absolutely was not the case. So long story short, February, he started to work on a plan. He presented his ideas to the city leadership team. We started to develop our own individual department plans in response to the pandemic. And lo and behold, March 12th, when it finally started to take root in Colorado, our city was one of the first cities to close our facilities. We did so in response to a lot of the information we were receiving out of China and from further back east about the widespread issues, the way in which the coronavirus would spread, and in addition to that, the sort of how easily it could spread, and then the deadly catalyst for it. So we were one of the first cities in Colorado to make that decision, which is a great testament to the leadership of the Commerce City Police Department, the Commerce City government team, to get our cities closed and in anticipation of what was further going to take place. I can tell you with most things that was met with some resistance from quite a few residents. I don't think it necessarily had anything to do with city government. I think it was the lack of the recreation facilities that drew the ire of most people. They're pretty popular, and when people don't have access to them, that creates quite a stir. And keep in mind, this is also before Colorado decided to, as a state, decided that they were going to start to close facilities. So we took a little bit of criticism for being too far ahead, but it turns out that that was the right call. Since that time, we've been working primarily on coronavirus-related issues. I can tell you from the police department standpoint, we wanted to take special care of our more vulnerable population. I can tell you early on in the incident, we visited every one of our assisted living facilities. We wanted to make sure that our seniors knew that we were here for them. And for those that could not go out and get their own supplies, we were absolutely critical in making sure that we had a response to be able to do those things. And so we're pretty proud of the work that we did. In addition to that, we work with most of our food banks, which generally speaking, Commerce City food banks get pretty good service during regular times of the year. But when folks were being laid off work and having their employment terminated, the Commerce City food bank saw unprecedented need. And so we did everything we could to make sure that they had the supplies that they needed to assist, again, some of the folks that needed more assistance than others. And then what we quickly found out was that, and I'm sure most of you understood, the personal protective equipment here in Colorado was almost non-existent. We ran out probably within the first, if it hadn't been for our emergency manager, the city would have run out probably as this pandemic took place. We had back ordered a lot of things, again, thanks to Kirk Dominic and getting that taken care of for us and making sure that we were fully prepared for the pandemic. So where are we at today? And I'm sorry, I keep getting things coming in. I apologize for that. So where we are today is this: we've introduced a reopening plan to our city council members. We did that about 2 weeks ago. And I am happy to say that both today and Thursday, the Commerce City Municipal Court is open for business. Folks can go in there and get their court businesses taken care of, their parking citations and any other issues that need to be done with the courts. They are now operating fully with some new guidelines in place. One of the things we did was when we tentatively opened up the courts, we did so out of a need. We had several trials that were pressing up against right to a speedy trial claims in which we were going to have to throw out the cases. Our municipal judge made a decision that he didn't want to do that. And so last week we actually opened up for 2 trials. Um, so that was our test run. This week, the courts are in full operation, albeit on a limited basis, and we still are practicing some of the safeguards that have been put in place by the state and the public health orders. So we've limited the number of people that can be inside the courtroom. We're doing as much business in the parking lot and open air as we can. We don't allow milling around in the lobby. You literally have to go inside into the courtroom, get your business taken care of, and then you're promptly escorted and asked to leave the premises. I realize that probably doesn't sound very friendly, but again, we did all of this to make sure that people that have to come to court are mandated to come to court. It's not an option, but we also have a responsibility to keep them safe as well as the staff. So a lot of the things that we're doing, the social distancing, the lobby management practices, a lot of those things we're doing are designed just for that, to keep people safe. And so I mentioned earlier that we created a reopening plan that went to council for their feedback. We got that feedback back earlier this week, and we've since remodeled our plan. And I am extremely happy to tell you guys, and very few people know this yet because we haven't publicized it, but the city will be reopening effective next Wednesday and Thursday. The city is going to move to a 4-day work week. Let me rephrase that, a 4-day business work week, which means that from Monday through Thursday, between the hours of 8 and 5, the city will be running as normal. On Friday, we've decided that to give staff a break, the additional cleaning that needs to take place, we needed an additional day to do that. And so Fridays and Saturdays, the Civic Center will be getting a thorough cleaning so that we are available to reopen back up on Monday. We've sort of cut down on the extended hours because, again, we wanted to make sure that staff had the capacity to deal with the crowds. But you are going to experience some changes when you come to Commerce City in the future, particularly the Civic Center. You will notice now, if you were to show up there today for court or next week for any business that you would need to be concluded, before you enter the building, we're asking what the purpose of your business is. And the reason we're doing that is that depending upon where you go, we're trying to limit the number of people in the building waiting in line. We are practicing social distancing inside the lobby. So in the atrium inside the actual building, we will not allow any more than 5 people in at a time. And then once that business is taken care of, they leave the building, we will allow the next one in. Probably the most innovative thing that we're doing to, again, make sure that residents can get their business taken care of is we've purchased some lobby management software that allows people to get their business taken care of through appointment only. And what this does is it prevents the minute you open the door, 200 people are waiting outside. And the entire city structure will be moving to an appointment-based system. We will still allow folks to come in a drop-in basis, but when we contact them outside, if they don't have an appointment or if we don't have a window of opportunity for them to be seen, an appointment will be made for them, and then they'll have the option to either wait and see if a no-show occurs, or they can take off and we will text them when the next available appointment is. I think that will probably be the biggest feature that you will see at the Civic Center. We're testing everything at the Civic Center first. That's where the bulk of most of our forward-facing resident services are. And so the 4 places that will be providing assistance to residents starting next Wednesday will be community development, the police records window, courts, as well as the city clerk. We've made the decision that trying to incorporate all of the services in one opening would be impractical and would probably lead to, quite frankly, citizen frustration, and we wanted to reduce that as much as possible. So again, I think we talk about some of the innovative things that have occurred out of this pandemic. I don't think we had an eye towards the future as it relates to making sure that no one shows up to the Civic Center and they wait in line for an hour for anything. Residents will now have the ability to make arrangements based upon their schedule. And when their schedule is up, they should be able to walk in, get their business taken care of, and walk right out of the Civic Center. So we're extremely pleased with that. One of the things, for those of you that have been paying attention to city council meetings, we've been doing those virtually. That comes with its own set of challenges. Receiving citizen communication and getting citizen feedback on ordinances and things that relate to the public can be a bit of a challenge. And one of the things we're trying to tackle right now is, once we're out of the pandemic and council is fully seated again at the dais, how do we manage that? As most of you know, government is fully open to the public, but I would argue having more than 60 people in council chambers at one time in this pandemic may be a recipe for disaster. And so we're taking a look at how do we incorporate the digital format of receiving council communication and portray that into a live session so that everybody can participate from the comfort of their own home. Quite some unique challenges to it, but we certainly are working in that direction, again, to make sure that we can keep staff safe, we can keep our folks safe, and we can keep our residents safe when they come to visit. From the police department standpoint, we were anticipating receiving a reduction in our calls to service. And I will tell you, probably the first 2 weeks, we had about a 20% drop off in requests for the need for the police. That quickly went away. We are back to normal. As I sit here today, we've actually dealing with a slight increase. And I will tell you, we were anticipating an increase in domestic violence and child abuse related calls because people were laid off, and quite frankly, they're stuck in the house together, and there's nothing else to do, nowhere to go take the kids for the weekend. Due to social distancing requirements and some of the public health orders, the natural inclination was to believe that those types of interpersonal behind closed door crimes would increase. In Commerce City, they actually did not. They actually went down. I will tell you where we saw the biggest increase was in our neighborhood nuisance type calls. And I generally believe that's because, since most folks were sitting at home, they were able to notice that their neighbor was parking where they shouldn't be, and that things were backing up on the streets that residents typically didn't like. So our dog barking calls went through the roof. Resident complaints to, again, what we call neighborhood nuisance issues, vehicles being parked inappropriately, unregistered vehicles, the things that neighbors start to take place when they are literally spending their 40-hour work week at home. And so on that note, I know that I was asked to talk about the COVID-19 response, but I'm sure most of you are aware that, the nation has bigger issues right now as it relates to police use of force and the issues that surround that. I will tell you, I've been in Commerce City since 2015. I came here as a police commander. I was made the chief 2 years later. And I got to tell you, this is a great place to work. And I am extremely proud of the work that we did. And I noticed that here we have 2 former council members, and, kudos to them for having the foresight to realize that Commerce City could have very easily have been the next hashtag in a national movement. And so one of the things that they were able to do was bring the Department of Justice in here through their technical assistance program to work through a lot of the issues that the rest of the nation appears to be dealing with right now. And I can tell you that was a blessing. I'll also be the first one to tell you that decision was not made lightly, and there were quite a few police employees that didn't take too kindly to that. But I will tell you, it put us ahead of the game. A lot of the things that you're starting to see on national television simply, I want to be very careful about how I phrase this. I don't want to suggest that they can't occur here. They would be very difficult for those to be pattern and practices of poor behavior because of the way we're currently structured. Can things happen? Absolutely. It's one of the things in almost 30 years of doing police work. I'll never forget my first sergeant telling me that as a supervisor, you can put all the rules and practices you place. Bad people are bad people, whether they're cops, doctors, lawyers, or anything. And unfortunately, since we hire from the human race, our ability to hire one of those people, it can occur. What I can tell you is, as I sit here today as a chief of police for Commerce City, I am very happy to talk about some of our practices that would absolutely root out people that are not interested in doing the people's work through policing. We take great pride in that. Most chiefs will tell you that. I will tell you we actually have the proof to suggest it. We've been getting inundated with requests related to the George Floyd murder, and let's just call it what it is. I've been very clear about my resolve around that, and I will tell you, typically most law enforcement agencies don't respond on what other people are doing. Uh, that has been and will be the wrong approach moving forward. It didn't take anything for most of us to look at that video and realize that what we saw was an absolute tragedy. That was an inappropriate, inexcusable use of force on an unarmed and restrained Black man. Anybody called it anything other than that is simply making excuses for poor behavior. And as I sit here today, I simply won't do that. I will also be the first one to tell you that I don't have access to all the facts, witness statements, and everything that goes on. But like most of you, I know what I saw. I know right when I see it, and I know wrong when I see it, and that was clearly wrong. For the life of me, I can't articulate how I would feel if that was my child with a 200-pound man kneeling on his neck for no other good reason than to do it. Anybody not outraged at that is fooling themselves. And while I will tell you, I want nothing more than for the Commerce City Police Department to be the love child of our residents, we screw up on occasion. My job is to make sure that when we do, we deal with those things as we should, and that at the end of the day, we maintain trust with our residents. Because quite frankly, our power is derived from the people that we serve. And the minute they decide to take it away, it goes away. I also want to be very careful that policing is a very difficult profession. Most of you know that. It is extremely hard to take a 22-year-old man or woman with rarely any life experience and put them in the middle of a street and say, you're now going to have somebody try to take your life. How do you handle that? That requires hours and hours of training, mentoring, coaching. It requires a lot. We often get asked, why does it take a year before a cop can start to work in solo beat? And what that means is by the time we do the hiring process, we put them through the academy, we do our own Commerce City immersion training to make sure they're policing the way we expect them to. Then we give them a book of our policies with almost 800 pages in it, in addition to all of the ordinances and laws that they need to remember. It is a hard job. It's not easy to do. But at the end of the day, what we've asked our folks to do is do what they would do if they had the heart of righteous human beings. That will get you out of most situations. If you decide to do the other, it will probably cause you some problems. But this is a time-tested profession. I am in no way going to beat a soapbox and tell you that we've done everything right. We certainly have not. And I will tell you, if there ever was a time to listen, that should have been about 5 years ago. It was for Commerce City when we had the Department of Justice come in here and take a look at literally every one of our practices and everything that we did and literally rewrite the book. During that process, we lost approximately 20-something cops that decided they would go across the street and try policing there. Good riddance is what I would say. As we try to improve things, we absolutely need people on board that are willing to listen, learn, and that aren't afraid of feedback and criticism. If you've ever been in any sort of supervisory position, and I would argue that every police officer has the ability to be in that position, that's one of the things that occurs with the job. That has never been any more difficult than it is today. But the worst thing we could do is turn a blind eye, not listen, and pretend like we know what's best for the people that we serve. They've got some idea about how they want to be policed. My job is to make sure I take that information and put it into something that we all can live with. So on that note, I don't want to continue talking. I would love to take questions. Hopefully, if there are any questions about coronavirus, COVID-19 related city incidents, or policing in general, the George Floyd incident, I've been doing this for almost 30 years. I like to think I'm pretty reasonable, and I will be happy to entertain any questions.
Chief, I have a question. Did any of the officers test positive with COVID-19?
That's a very good question. We did have one officer test positive pretty early on, and he contracted it from what we assume was his elderly parents. He went and visited them, and he ended up contracting it. He was asymptomatic, which means he didn't get sick, but because his parents were positive and they did get sick, he got tested and he was sick, and I believe he stayed at home for almost 26, 27 days. The rest of the department so far, knock on wood, we have not had anybody else test positive. So we think a lot of that had to do with our practices that we put in place. If you haven't seen a Commerce City police officer in this pandemic, they aren't necessarily going in people's homes when they don't have to. We are wearing gloves and masks, and quite frankly, we don't even conduct briefing in the building anymore. They're doing it all via electronic medium, so we've sort of limited contact as best we can. The downside to that is, in case you hadn't seen the traffic in Commerce City, it's gotten a little out of control because we sort of limited contact with the public, which meant we virtually went to only issuing speeding tickets and traffic tickets when we absolutely needed to. And so backing off of that created another problem, in that, quite frankly, Commerce City roadways turned into freeways. But we're slowly starting to move back into that. But to answer your question, only one Commerce City employee tested positive. I think at the city level, we had about 4 people test positive.
Chief, I have a question. We've been hearing a lot of fireworks at night, and it seems like a couple of these streets that Holly, they're using for drag racing or something like that. And I've seen it over Facebook that a couple of the residents saying, oh, it must be race night again because they're out there. And right to the east of us, it seems between Kearney and I don't know where it is, but every night we hear these loud explosive fireworks. Have you been receiving any complaints about that?
Yes, we have a multitude of them, and I can tell you it absolutely is related to street racing. We made contact with actually there's a park over there that they play volleyball at. I'm drawing a blank at the name of the park. But we did in fact make contact with the car clubs and told them that we were not going to tolerate the street racing. For the most part, they complied. But this isn't a very popular time for police, and I think for the most part, they just decided they were going to do what they're going to do. We have, in fact, been monitoring that area. One of the challenges that we have is they simply just don't stop, and our policy doesn't require us to chase people for traffic-related offenses. And so that's a bit of the challenge that we've got is, yes, we know they're doing it. Really, the only way to get them to stop is to get them to stop for us. And if they don't do that, it just causes more problems throughout the city. But yes, we are aware of it. Any other questions?
I have a question about, you said that you ran out pretty early on the PPE equipment. Did you secure some more? What are you doing forward for that?
Yes, we ran out fairly early, and we didn't run out for our needs. One of the problems with policing is we think we have enough until a pandemic hits, and then when you realize when you're swapping out rubber gloves and masks every other call, a workforce of 140 goes through those pretty quick. In addition to that, I mentioned earlier that we went around and coordinated with some of our assisted living facilities. They were even shorter than we were, and so we took a lot of our equipment over to some of those facilities so that they could help their residents. So we were sort of short on equipment through our own doing. And lately, the federal government opened up their reserves. Adams County got a significant share of PPE gear in, and so we were able to get some from them, not only just for the city in its entirety, but also for our assisted living facilities and some of our more vulnerable populations. So right now, as it sits, we are doing okay.
That's good to know.
Yes, ma'am.
How
Any,
about the open? You talked about the city is going to be opening. Just those few departments for now. What is the plan for like the rec centers and things like that?
that is a great question. The four departments that I mentioned earlier, those are the departments that have the biggest public-facing counters. And so that's why they were chosen to be opened up first. Now, finance and economic development and IT, they all have forward-facing services that they provide. They just are not essential at this time. And quite frankly, most people probably did not even realize that there was a lapse in service. A lot of the things that we do at the city could be provided virtually. People could email in submissions and still get the things that they needed. Very few things actually were required to be in person. There are some things that still need to be done in person. Tax payments, a lot of our businesses prefer to pay in cash. You can't stick that kind of money in an envelope and hope it gets there. So those are the things that we're moving towards delivering. But a lot of the services could be provided virtually, and that's what we did. For example, police reports. If you needed one, we created a form on our website. You'd fill it out, and we could literally email you the form back. So there was no need to show up in person. But what we also realize is not all of our community has access to a computer. And so I think we will always have to have a need for residents to walk in and get business taken care of. As it relates to the rec center, the state issued a public health order yesterday that allowed for the rec center to be open. Part of the problems with the state orders that come out is they provide very little guidance with how they're supposed to be ordered. And so our city attorney and our incident management team are taking a look at those orders and making a determination as to how best do we open up the rec center. Keep in mind, rec centers are a little tricky. We would literally have to limit the number of people that are in the rec centers. The number of programs and services that are available would have to be limited. And quite frankly, the city will need to make a decision based upon, we can only open a rec center for 10 people at a time. Is it financially beneficial for us to do that? And so those are some of the things that staff is currently taking a look at to make a decision. We do not have an opening date for the rec center. I believe, as a matter of fact, I got a meeting with our Parks and Recs director immediately after this one, and that's on our list of things to discuss. How do we accommodate the public and keep them safe and maintain the social distancing and compliance with the health orders? Rec centers are extremely tricky because people are working out, they're sweating, they're breathing hard, and how do you keep it safe for everybody? And then what do you do with vulnerable people that also need to have access to the rec center as well? Do we have altered hours for those folks? We got a lot of questions that have to be answered. So to answer your question, no time frame has been established. We're working on that this week and next week to come up with a game plan.
Thanks for that info. And just to let you know, we are part of the whole Chamber of Commerce's around the country. So we do come across the different reopening plans for different cities and states. So if you ever need anything, let us know.
Will do. Thank you, ma'am.
Anyone else have any questions?
I was going to ask you, Chief, did Denver ask for any assistance from any of our officers with any of the incidents they had to back up their officers?
That is another great question. As you know, the Commerce City Police Department and quite frankly, our city operates on a network of mutual aid agreements. And what that means is that any entity that you have an agreement with, if they need a resource from you, they call and simply ask. So to answer your question, yes, we did in fact send a contingency of police officers into Denver. I believe it was last Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. We did not send anybody Tuesday, and my understanding is they've made the same request for this Friday and Saturday. So yes, we did send some resources down there to assist. Any other questions for me? These Zoom meetings are extremely uncomfortable.
We'll be happy when we can all get back together, right?
I know.
It's like you're on the spot.
I don't mind it. It's part of the professional courtesy.
So you were saying about the that you didn't see any increase in like domestic violence or things like that. So and the new how is that? The fireworks and the drag racing. Is there any other kind of top 5 that you were finding from the residents?
Again, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of our residential nuisance crimes sort of went up, and I truly believe it was because mom, dad, and all 5 kids were stuck at home on top of each other, and they were noticing things in their neighborhood that previously probably didn't bother them as much. But now that all 5 vehicles are back in the 2-car driveway, there was considerable notice of, look where that guy is parking his stuff. So our request for parking enforcement went through the roof. In addition to that, dogs barking went through the roof, and a lot of the other the other issues that went along with the public health orders. We were inundated by requests for us to make people put on masks, go back inside their house. People were contacting neighbors, having barbecues, not social distancing. We got inundated with quite a bunch of those as well. Fortunately or unfortunately, depending upon which side of the fence you are, we simply went out and made advisements on those. But the tattletale culture of Bob's not wearing his mask and he just went in the Pizza Hut, quite frankly, has no place in modern day policing. So advisement only, then we moved on to other things. So as it relates to crime, again, we've had the drag racing thing has quite frankly always been a problem in Commerce City. I think a lot of the metro area police departments do not chase for traffic violations. And so people feel emboldened to just run from the police as they see fit. And that's particularly the problem we're dealing with the incident as Mr. Bullock described is we've contacted them and told them we won't tolerate it, but they also know we're not going to chase them. And so it just gets compounded and becomes a watch what I can do sort of event. Yeah, it is what it is, but I would argue that chasing them for traffic related offenses probably is not a better solution. God knows I don't want any of my officers responsible for a car barreling through somebody's living room at 2 o'clock in the morning because we chased him because he was speeding. So it is just the effective what we deal with. Hopefully that answers your question.
How about, I know that at the beginning when people were hoarding things at the grocery store, I do know that there was an increased presence of the police department, like at King Soopers, Walmart. Is that something that maybe more like in those late night hours when they are speeding, that just a presence of a police car?
We can certainly do that, and that depends absolutely on the level of calls for service that we're currently dealing with. We are not exactly staffed to provide an officer for every issue that occurs, but we do make our area officers responsible for the incidents that are taking place in their area. And so just take a minute to just describe the structure of the police department as it relates to patrol. Is we've got a North Commander and a South Commander, and they are responsible for the center line is 88th Street. Everything south of 88th is considered South Command. Everything north of 88th belongs to the North Commander. And so they take responsibility for everything that takes place in their area. And on any given day, if we're at full staffing where nobody's on vacation, nobody's in training, I've got 10 officers per shift. That is 6 down south and 4 up north. We very rarely have everybody at work. So that number can drop down to as low as 7 on some occasions. And if it's Friday and Saturday night when we're experiencing our greatest volume of calls for service. Trying to have an officer stick around in the neighborhood to be free and clear to deal with that becomes problematic. There are other pressing needs that need to get addressed. And so we have to adjust staffing as, quite frankly, the levels of calls for service mandate. So it isn't as simple as just taking an officer and go, you're going to manage the speeding issues. That officer can't respond to a call for domestic violence because we may have speeders. So we have to adjust all the time.
Chief, I'm sending a message from Sean. His audio is not working.
Okay.
He just said thank you, and he appreciates our police department.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that as well.
What is your take on the SROs? I know Denver Public Schools is kind of looking at discontinuing that, having the officers in the schools. What is your thought on that?
You know, I just read that article this morning. I think the nation is hurting right now, and they're looking to figure out what's the best way moving forward. Quite frankly, I grew up in Chicago. We didn't have SROs. We had a security guard, and it was usually somebody's father who wore a vest and hung out by the front doors. So I'm not used to the SRO concept. So I don't have a dog in the fight regarding it. It is a service that the school district pays for through a 50% dividend. For every SRO that you see that's assigned as an SRO, the school district that they're assigned pays for 50% of their salary. So if that was to go away, it would certainly be a cost savings for them. And that, I would imagine, the city would have to make a decision if they're going to absorb that 50% to keep the employee or take away the contribution and we lose the SROs. Currently, we've got 6 established. I think we got 4 in Adams 14 in the south half of the city, and we've got 2 working in 27J. We have not had that conversation with them yet. But quite frankly, I don't know what's going to happen. And if I was asked to be supportive or not, they certainly do provide a benefit. But having police officers in a teaching environment may not necessarily, I think there are other things we can do to accomplish that. And I think it's important to remember how police ended up in schools anyway. It was a result of the Columbine incident. So again, the pendulum is just swinging. I would certainly hate to suggest that removing SROs out of schools would make schools less safe. Quite frankly, we practice enough lockdowns and have enough security processes in place to hopefully prevent another attack inside of a school. But you know, that's a tough question. And if I was to be asked by our elected officials if I supported it one way or the other, I would remain on the fence about it. It depends on what you're looking to get out of it. I can tell you the Commerce Cities SRO program is one of the best in the countries. And again, I'm not just saying that because I'm the chief. I'm saying that because the DOJ came out here. They looked at our program and started to copy what we did to other organizations that they were going, we do it right. So I'm extremely proud of ours. Our SROs are not necessarily police officers first. They're coaches and mentors and educators first. They are police officers 4th, 5th down the line when they need to be. They aren't arresting kids. They aren't enforcing school things. They're there, quite frankly, to provide a sense of safety and security for the kids and doing what most of us should be doing is trying to make better adults out of it. So I'm extremely proud of our program. I would hate to see it go away based on what I believe is an overreaction, but I fully understand why.
You know, Chief, there is absolutely a new normal that has been established in the country. Matter of fact, around the world now, with all the events that have occurred since the first of the year. This is one of those years, 2020, that you were going in with high expectations, and it just seems like it keeps disappointing you month after month, you know. So there are a lot of things that are going to be different and changed throughout, and it's not only because of what's happening, but it's budgets now. I mean, with the sales tax that has been lost through a lot of the businesses being closed down for 3 months, there isn't the revenue to do a lot of things that we could have done otherwise. And so is your force nimble enough to shift on this new normal and establish himself and say, okay, this is how it's going to look in the future. Let's deal with it.
You know, that is a very pointed question that is right on topic. I will tell you, before we were dealing with the murder of Mr. Floyd, the police department and most departments in the city took anywhere from between a 10 to 15% cut. And as you can imagine, at least in the police department, most of that comes through all of the positions that had previously been funded in our 2020 budget for this year that hadn't been filled. We vacated, so that money went off the table, which means I think that was probably 8 positions. In addition to that, most of our training and career development money went away as well. It's usually the first few places that police departments start to experience cuts. The problem with that approach is then Mr. Floyd murder takes place, and now we're going to be asked to do so much more with 10, 15% less. It becomes an uphill battle, and I absolutely agree with Mr. Bullock. Crying about it don't help. The money simply is not there to fund these things. And so as a community, I've been getting inundated with all of the things residents think our police department needs to do to prevent George Floyd tragedy. Most of them have no idea that we've already done a lot of the work that they're suggesting. And when I say a lot of it, we hit a goal of about implementing 90% of the DOJ recommendations. We got up to 92%. Some of the things that they wanted us to do, we simply couldn't do because financially they were too restrictive or they were against the law in Colorado. So we weren't able to implement those. But we instituted 92% of the 76 recommendations that they made. If residents knew that, they'd be a little bit more comfortable about it. And I certainly understand the awakening that people are feeling as it relates to the outrage surrounding Mr. Floyd. But at the end of the day, creating something that requires funding where funding is not available, simply, we can't do it. I get to make a request for the budget. Whether it gets funded or not is not up to me. It's left up to the city council. And I got to tell you, they're struggling with these cuts all over the place. And so at the end of the day, there will be no easy answers, only difficult solutions. And we all got to feel where the pain is. I can tell you one of the things that I read that was quite disturbing is to correct police officers, you should defund them. That would be a nightmare in my opinion. You are going to get what you pay for. If you spend $5 and buy a Honda Accord with a Porsche emblem on it, it's going to run like a Honda Accord. You're going to get exactly what you paid for. And I am in no way suggesting that police departments should have unlimited funds, but defunding them to get them into compliance simply makes no sense at all. You certainly will not be happy with the police department that is running around with old equipment, old tactics, and the inability to train. Nobody wants to live in that place. Prime example of that is take a look at New Orleans 10 years ago. The most corrupt police department in the country. Their employees were making $26,000 a year. What comes around goes around, and I would caution, we do need to take our lumps. We need to take our cuts. We need to be in lockstep with the rest of the city departments. But this defunding to break the cycle, that has unintended consequences that will play out 5, 10 years from now. And you'll end up with a bunch of employees with rights that you wish you had never hired in the first place because they're the only people that would come here. So again, just food for thought. And again, these are very difficult decisions that need to be made. I don't think anybody has the right answer. What I am committed to is listening to our community, seeing what it is that they want to see come out of all of this, and then reassuring them that we're doing everything we can to be a model police agency. As I sit here today, I have had no less than 5 requests from other police departments about that DOJ thing you went through a few years ago. What was that like? Can you give me some info out of that? We are well ahead of the curve. Our residents should be grateful that we did what we did. As painful as it was, it made us a better organization. And instead of following and being 5 years behind, we're actually leading. And that's a good place to be, a great place to be, actually.
Any other questions?
Nice work, Chief Nichols. You're doing a good job.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Chief, for everything you do.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yes, thank you, Chief. I went through those hard times with the DOJ, but it was well worth it because we learned a lot. I can tell you, Sean and I, the insight we got from that was amazing on what goes on and what should and shouldn't go on. But thank you again, Chief.
All right. Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. Mr. Ford, thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Any other questions for me? Well, what I will tell you is I am always available. I will tell you that my email is on the city's website. I am one of the few chiefs in this region that actually answers his own emails. Most of them get canned replies, and there's a staff member doing those. So if there's anything that any of you need that I can assist you with, by all means, feel free to drop me an email. Calling's a little bit more difficult. Those get screened, but emails, I know where those came from. So by all means, feel free to drop me a line. And you know, even if it's a matter of answering questions or providing insight, I would be more than happy to do that, because the more educated our community is about their police department, the better off they feel about it. Believe it or not, I still am arguing with residents about Commerce City police officer doing immigrant enforcement. It's something we have never done, but you would be amazed at the number of people that think we actually do that. So anytime we have the ability to get in front of people and educate them about what we're doing, brings me peace that they're better residents and serve best by us anyway. So thank you for your time.
Well, thank you for just being here for our Zoom meeting, and we hope to have you again sometime.
I would absolutely love that. Just let me know what I can do.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, everyone, and have a great afternoon.
All right. Thank you, everybody.